Hello, hello. Is this working? I think it might be working. Good morning, everybody. I'm gonna wait for Yago to come on here.
I'm here.
Hey, hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, I'm very tired, but I've got some great breakfast tea that I've been enjoying, so getting a little bit of spring in my step.
You know what type of tea I drink?
I don't. What do you drink?
Sovereignty.
Oh man, that's a good one. That's cool. That's funny. Well, it's great to have you here. It's great to be on. This is just for everybody listening. This is super impromptu. I was just talking to Yago, I don't know, yesterday, the day before, and realized we wanted to we wanted to discuss a bunch of stuff together, and I wanted to learn more about Bitcoin smart contracts. I've been following along, and I'm personally an investor in Sovereign, which is a Bitcoin smart contract platform. But Yago was like, "Hey, why don't we just host it on Spaces and we can I don't know, have a little bit more fun with it." So here we are.
Yeah, I've been looking to catch up with you as well. You've been through a lot of exciting things, and I think one thing that really caught my eye was two different tweets that you put out in the same day. One was how the best way to I think the first one when you were complaining about Bitcoin maxis that if people wanted to make life changing wealth, then they needed to be looking at alts. And then the other one was um, I'm a trader, but I keep 80% of my value in Bitcoin, and I book all of my profits in Bitcoin. And I thought it was really really interesting because there's a nuance there which is missed on a lot of people, I think.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, for me, I see Bitcoin as in crypto, it is the safest store of value. It is the one thing that I can trust beyond everything else, for many reasons. Decentralization is a very big one. Yes, there's other platforms that have degrees of decentralization, but none quite as far as Bitcoin. Um, but yeah, no, that's totally right. I am a big fan of crypto in general. I think that there's so many amazing things being built and some very long-term stuff that's going to be here for good. But at the end of the day, when I think of my savings, when I think of my wealth, I denominate it in Bitcoin.
Right. So I responded to your tweets around that was I said that the way people build wealth is more by investing than by trading, right? We all know that the majority of traders lose money, and even the very successful ones frequently blow up, right? We just had like the largest trader blow up in history about a month ago. $60 billion just disappeared, right?
Yes,
Um,
that is true. It's something to be aware of for everyone should be aware of. I think that I don't want to tell people not to trade because I know that there are a small percent of people that are going to be able to beat the market and they're going to be able to make life-changing wealth. But that's not a majority. A big majority, 80 to 90%, will lose money over time in trading. Now, if you're in a bull market like we are in crypto, you'll lose less money if you're denominating in Bitcoin, but you won't outperform. Sorry, go ahead. I just wanted to drop that in there.
no, no, that's this is a conversation. So I think for me, one of the things that I'm focused on, and what what I'm trying to like every time we have a bull market, uh, we get this huge influx of people, and they're super excited about this ability to change their lives to become. And what I think basically everyone wants is the same thing. They want to become self-sovereign. They want to know that they are going to have control over their destiny. They want to know that they're going to be able to take care of their families. They want to know that they're going to be able to pay off their debts. They want their lives to change in a way which is going to empower them. And so one of the and I think trading in of itself, I've never been a trader because I don't believe that I have the skills, and I think that when you're trading, you're putting a lot of. First of all, it's very complicated if you're doing proper risk management, but even if you are, you're putting a lot of your destiny in the hands of the dice. Will you get the timing right? Will things move with you? And so one of the things that I've frequently said about Bitcoin is that every single generation has basically just one decision that they need to make. And if they get that decision right, then their lives will take care of themselves. And then, on the edges, they can play games, they can quit jobs, they can trade, they can do all of the other things on the edges. But every single generation has one thing they need to get right. For our grandparents' generation, that was going to college, it was going to university, right? If you got a college degree in the 40s and the 50s, your life was taken care of. Didn't matter what other stuff you fucked up. For our parents' generation, it was buying a house, right? If you bought a house in the 70s or the 80s, even with a huge fucking mortgage, you're a millionaire now. Your life is taken care of. You have fuck you money. For our generation, it's buying Bitcoin. The one thing that you need to do is buy and hold Bitcoin for the same period of time that your parents would hold a house or that your grandparents would hold a degree, which is to say your entire life, because that gives you fuck you money and it gives you the ability to give something to the next generation. And the reason I'm a huge fan of the amount of innovation that's happening in the entire crypto space. I frequently talk about how much admiration I have for what has been created with Ethereum and in other places. All of my work is in the smart contract space, and yet I keep talking about Bitcoin. And the reason I do that is because I think life-changing money is available to every single person with a basically 100% guarantee if they just make that one choice. And I think it's really interesting to explore the reason why. And so I'll try to be brief on this, but basically, everything has changed, and I think people don't even notice the right way in which it changed. So people say about Bitcoin that it's digital scarcity. I actually don't think that's the big thing about Bitcoin. I think the
Okay.
big innovation with Bitcoin, there's just two of them. One is it's not software. We've come to think of software as something that changes all the time. Like every year there's a new upgrade, or if it's online, it's being, there's continuous deployment and it changes all the time. And whatever the top software package is in every field changes every few months, and the OSs update and everything. Bitcoin is a totally new way of thinking about digital. It's hard software. It's software that the way it works today is the way it's going to work tomorrow, is the way it's going to work for your children, is the way it's going to work for your grandchildren. It's the first type of digital thing that you can put your wealth into for the long term. And if you actually look at where the wealth in the world is and how, there's books like The Millionaire Next Door, but also if you just look at how rich people think versus how people who are not rich think, it's all about wealth preservation. And so the biggest things in the world today are real estate, by far more assets in real estate than anything else. Next, it's long term bonds, so 10 or 30-year bonds, and then after that it's gold. Each of those asset classes is like an order of magnitude bigger than the last. Real estate is like a multi-trillion-dollar asset class. Bonds are a trillion-dollar asset class, and gold is a $10 trillion asset class. And Bitcoin is the first instantiation of this in the digital realm. And that's why it's the one decision you need to make. And the second cool thing about Bitcoin is it's the first time in about 2,000 years that we've invented a new way of protecting property. So private property was a invention, and the way we protected it was they were big guys with swords or knives or guns who would protect your private property, or you would pay them protection money to protect your property. And now we have digital private property, which is borderless and doesn't require violence. It requires maths. It requires cryptography And so it makes every single person self-sovereign without having to pay protection money. This is a huge social change. And you combine those things with the fact that we're moving more and more of our lives into the digital realm, and I think it's clear that what's happening is that we're moving to a Bitcoin standard, but not in the way like Saifedean thinks, I think in a much more interesting way.
I completely, basically everything you said, I'm on board with. When I first discovered Bitcoin, I did think of it as software. I didn't think deeper about the scarcity aspect. I didn't think about really any of these things. I was too young, and I think a lot of these hard money concepts and things hadn't really been fully realized. Now, some early thinkers, I believe Hal Finney certainly was one of the first ones to kind of promote these ideas. But I was just kind of thinking, oh man, I can mine some Bitcoin. I can pay off my computer that I bought to play games on, and I'll go about my day. At the time, of course, Bitcoin was $10, $5. I remember selling some for pennies during a flash crash, and so I that was my first experience. I got my feet wet and I got familiar with crypto. With Bitcoin. There wasn't a crypto back then, and for me, it was very, very special because I had been banned from using PayPal when I was 14 years old. I don't remember what I was trying to do. I was just trying to use PayPal to buy something, and at some point they decided to KYC me. In the very early days, if I remember right, they didn't KYC at all. Somehow I slipped through, and then they banned me and they froze my money until I was 18 years old. And so for me at a very young age, I thought, oh my gosh, it's so clear why Bitcoin is so much better because simply no one can ever take it from me. If I have it encrypted if I have my password memorized in my head, that's there forever. No one is ever going to be able to extract it unless, well, by force, but let's hope that nothing ever comes to that. But yeah, and so to be able to store my own value without asking permission from anyone, without having to go anywhere to go get it, that I can access it anywhere in the world. That was pretty big for me, and I started to realize when I was 18 and I got that money back from PayPal. That was when I started thinking a lot more about Bitcoin, and I started to. At the time I was starting to buy in a little bit, and I started to look at it as more of a long-term future investment. Um, but it wasn't, I guess, until it wasn't until we broke that $1,000 back in 2016 that and I know the price isn't the main thing about Bitcoin, but the game theory dictates that Bitcoin is going to go up over time. It's just simply going to be that way. And so I saw that new all-time high break and I realized, okay, this is for real. Bitcoin isn't going away, and I have no idea how high it's going. There's not, there's no top. That was what really rejuvenated my interest in Bitcoin, and I started to dedicate most of my time into Bitcoin back in late 2016.
Yeah, exactly. I think the topic that we're talking about, like we said, it was going to be Bitcoin and smart contracts. And later on, I think we can talk about how smart contracts are coming to Bitcoin, have come to Bitcoin, and what that means. But I think maybe even before that, it makes sense to mention how smart contract platforms are different from Bitcoin in a fundamental way. Because
That would be great.
most people think of this whole thing of crypto as just basically one asset class, right? So you can invest in stonks, or you can invest in houses, or you can invest in Lambos, or you can invest in crypto. But in the world of crypto, there are actually several different asset classes. Three examples. So one, which is obviously different, is NFTs. Another, which is different, is protocol coins, right? So ETH is a protocol coin, SOL is a protocol coin, and then there's Bitcoin. And what's weird about Bitcoin is it's the first, and so you would think it would have the most competitors, but it actually has the least competitors. It's got zero competitors. And that's weird. Like, why would that happen? And I think the reason that happened is because people are are misunderstanding on a very, very fundamental level what is actually going on here. They look at this whole blockchain thing and they think this is technology. This is a technology play, and it's that as well. But the reason people think it's a tech play is because we've gotten so used to everything new being a tech play, right? There's the whole .com bubble, and then there was Google and Facebook, and everything looks like a tech stock to us these days. Bitcoin actually used tech, but in a totally different way. It wasn't trying to build the best tech or to be a cool, fancy feature. It's got no features. What it did is it rethought what you can do with technology. And so instead of doing a tech play, it created a money play. And pretty much everyone who's come after that has missed that key point, right? That what Bitcoin actually invented was the very concept of digital property. So let's rewind the clock just a little bit. In the 90s, everyone was super excited about the internet, in the same way that people are super excited about blockchain now, right? It was going to make the world free. It was going to, information was going to be free. Anyone would be able to communicate with anyone. Borders would become obsolete. Everything, society was going to change. And then what happened was in this century, we discovered that everything was basically being co-opted by the Chinese government, by government surveillance, surveillance capitalism. You didn't own anything. Twitter could boot you off their platform anytime. And so we look around and we say, what the fuck happened? How did we get it so wrong? And the answer is that on the internet, you own nothing. The only people who own anything are the landlords who own the servers. So whatever you put onto Facebook, you're like a farmer on Facebook. Kind of like a yield farmer working for Facebook, right? You go and you create the content, they make all the money.
Absolutely.
And that's because you own nothing. And so what happened with Bitcoin is Satoshi Nakamoto invented a way to have a remarkable thing. People call it digital scarcity, but scarcity is the symptom. It's not the cause. The cause is digital property rights, right? The ability to have something which is digital and where you can have property rights over it. And the first instantiation of that is Bitcoin. So that was a very big thing that he built. And smart contracts are going to rewrite how we think about property completely. But at the same time, the second thing that he did was he created what I was calling digital reliability. The ability to create a digital system that no one can change. And therefore, when you hold Bitcoin, you know you can hold it for 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. Now, the vast majority of wealth is held by old people. And this has been true in every single society because you accumulate wealth over time. There's nothing more powerful than compound interest. And so if you're thinking, how do I create wealth for myself, for the people that I love, in a way which is going to be sustainable? And that's what basically everyone who has kids, everyone who needs to put someone through college, everyone who's thinking about retirement is doing, right? That's where 90% of the global wealth is always going to be. What you're going to look around is you're going to say, what can I put my money into which is going to be reliable, where I'm not going to have to trade it. I can just know that it's going to be there for me when I need it. And when
Right. I don't want to think about updates. I don't want to think about anything. I don't want to think about developers making Bitcoin better. I just want to know that everything's going to be the same.
Exactly. Boring is good when it comes to wealth creation. You just let the compound interest work for you. And so that's the remarkable thing about Bitcoin. It created these two huge innovations that almost no one talks about: digital property rights and digital reliability. And digital scarcity is the symptom of that. It's the surface thing that we see, but it's not the fundamental. It's not the first principles.
I appreciate that take on reliability. That's, for me, the biggest reason why and a lot of people denominate in, say, Ethereum, for instance, and I'm not knocking them at all. And I think that if you're going to be someone that pays extremely close attention to Ethereum or another smart contract platform, and that's what you do all day, every day, then great. I think that, you should put your focus and your money there. But for me, I can't be everywhere at once. I can't be watching everything all the time. And Bitcoin is the only thing that I can trust that I don't have to watch. I don't have to pay attention to Bitcoin. I don't have to know what Bitcoin development is going on because that's not really the concern.
Right. So a while back, I got involved in this project called Sovereign, and then I got to talk to you about it, and I was really excited, and I'm still super excited. And then, like, what was I excited about? I was excited about this idea that it was going to be possible to build smart contracts, to build an entire system of property rights, right? So property rights means, like, maybe I'll just take a step back here. I think of property rights as the basis for all rights, right? People think we have all kinds of rights. You have the right to life, you have the right to free speech, you have the right to this, you have the right to that. So many rights to enumerate, but at base, they're all a form of property rights. Your right to life is the right to the property of your body. Nobody can fuck with your body. No one can coerce or attack your body. The right not to have stuff stolen from you is the right to the stuff that you've created, or through the stuff you've created, acquired. In other words, stuff that other people have created and decided to swap with you. The right to free speech is the right to have no one coerce you to not own or control what you do with your words and your thoughts. Effectively, all rights come down to property rights. And so there's a fundamental, a very, very deep thing that happens when you can invent, and this has only happened once before in human history, when you can invent a new way of creating, protecting, and managing these types of rights. So I've been, involved with Ethereum and looking at Ethereum for a long time. I was lucky enough to know Vitalik before Ethereum even got created, when he was just writing for Bitcoin Magazine, and and then after that he was trying to create like a blockchain for prime numbers, and then so I've had the privilege of watching this process play out. And the one thing that's always bothered me about it is that all of these things, they kind of feel to me like test nets. And the reason they feel like test nets is because there's all of this really, really cool innovation happening, but it's happening on platforms which don't have the one of the key fundamental properties. They don't have reliability. When you want to create wealth, you protect property rights in a reliable way. That's basically the difference between rich places and poor places, right? Like, why is Switzerland rich and Nigeria poor? It's because Switzerland has good property rights and Nigeria doesn't. So one thing that always bothered me about the smart contract space is that it was being built on fundamentally shifting sands, right? Systems that constantly need to go through hard forks, constantly need to change. You don't know what they're going to look like in 10 years. I mean, like with Ethereum, we don't know what it's going to look like even in a year. It's about to undergo a massive change. But at the same time, the Bitcoin community frustrated me in a similar way, because the Bitcoin community also missed what was happening. They thought, we were creating this digital scarcity. They were seeing just the surface. When in actuality, right, if you just stick to just money, then you're really limiting how powerful this technology can be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I started getting excited about a year ago because I started playing and working with some other people that I'd known from the space for many years on a system called Rootstock. And what Rootstock does is it marries the best of both worlds. It takes EVM compatible, so Ethereum type smart contracts that you can use with MetaMask, that you can do everything basically. You can have a fully Turing complete system, but it's backed by Bitcoin. The base currency is Bitcoin, and most importantly, it's um, consensus system is Bitcoin proof of work itself. And so if you think, all right, like the entire world ultimately is going to be going towards looking for the most reliable stores of digital wealth, Bitcoin right now doesn't have any competitors, and it's almost impossible to create a competitor because you need history to prove
The
reliability.
the Immaculate Conception.
Exactly. So then where's the best place to start building the future of an economic system which is based on smart contracts? And as a result, doesn't rely on government enforcement, can be totally borderless. You can have a deal with someone. You can like lend money to someone in Nigeria and know they're going to pay you back because it's collateralized or because you can track their activity or any one of a million different creative ways that we're going to invent in the future, right? And so what Rootstock did is it started allowing us to begin developing these tools on Bitcoin. And that to me was like, wow, this is finally bringing together the two pieces: reliability and a generalizable ability to manage property rights. And I don't think I don't usually describe things that way because it's quite complicated. And even now, maybe I'm talking in too abstract a way. So it might be a good idea to talk about this in more concrete examples. But I think that is potentially the most exciting thing happening from a technological and social perspective in the space right now.
I love it. No, I mean, I'm okay. So on first glance, it's extremely exciting. I mean, that's why I invested for sure. But I would also like to ask and hear, what are maybe some disadvantages with Rootstock, or what are some challenges? What are some advantages that other smart contract platforms have right now that the Bitcoin smart contract community has to face?
Yeah. So I think you know in the short term, our space is very very driven by narrative, and we the Bitcoin community have a problem when it comes to narrative. They went through a trauma 4 years ago, right? There was like a 1-2 punch, which really screwed with the mindset of the Bitcoin community. And that 1-2 punch was that um, there was the block size wars, right? So in the block size wars, people wanted to allow Bitcoin to do all kinds of things. And in order to stuff all of that stuff onto the blockchain, they wanted to increase the block size, which would mean that Bitcoin would become less reliable because it would age, because it would change, and also because when you introduce that kind of scaling, then you can't scale reliably. And we've seen this with chain after chain after chain. And so the people who understood on a more fundamental, more intuitive level, or the developers, they were against this. The core devs were against this. But it became this huge battle because the short-term thinkers in the space, like exchanges, um, like the people who eventually migrated to to Bitcoin Cash, they could see how in the really really short term this would allow you to do all kinds of things. And so the Bitcoin community became the whole bunch of antibodies, right? The Bitcoin community kind of became allergic to the idea of change itself. And as a result, they became allergic in many ways to the ideas of adopting innovations from other places because they had seen how the people who were coming, from slightly outside the Bitcoin space, the exchanges or the altcoins, didn't understand the fundamental property of reliability. And at the same time, Ethereum exploded. And there was the whole ICOs thing, and there were all a million scams, and Bitcoiners looked at this and they were like, Jesus Christ, this is this is not the revolution we're
Yeah.
trying to build.
And a lot
And
of
so
people I know, they were Bitcoiners and they were, lured in by all this interesting, exciting stuff. And for some good reason, of course, the smart contract space was exploding. It was exciting. But like you said, there were so many scams and so many people got burnt. It just left this terrible taste in their mouths.
right. And so the allergic reaction that happened to the Bitcoin community was, all right, let's reject all of this stuff. Let's not even look at it. Let's not even think about it. And never anyone
Stick our
talks
heads in the
about,
sand.
yeah, but it's worse than that.
Yeah.
Because it went from being an immune system reaction, which is good, right? That's how you protect yourself from viruses, to being an allergic reaction, where your body starts thinking everything is attacking it and it starts eating itself. That's what toxic maximalism is. It's eating itself. So one challenge that we have is re-educating the Bitcoin community about, one, a lot of innovation is happening all over the space. We should be looking at it. We should be bringing it to Bitcoin. Two, Bitcoin started out, and what was exciting about Bitcoin was the sense of adventure, revolution, and innovation that was in Bitcoin. All right, it's not about just building the world's best store of wealth. It's not just about digital gold. Digital gold is the base currency for an entirely newly imagined economy that we can build. So that's one challenge. Second challenge, when you look at Ethereum versus Solana, right? Solana is growing very, very rapidly, but the amount of funds on Ethereum is just much, much greater by an order of magnitude than what exists in Solana. Now that's going to change, but it's going to take time to change. And I think it's cool and important to understand why it's going to change. So where did all this value, where did all this wealth that exists in the Ethereum ecosystem come from? Well, it came from itself. It's extremely self-referential, right? So first you had Ethereum, and Ethereum got a little bit of value. Then ICOs started happening. So there was demand for Ethereum, which meant the price of Ethereum went up, which meant the price of the ICO tokens went up. Then, on the basis of this, in 2020, what started happening is DeFi protocols started coming about. And the DeFi protocols were basically just being used to trade Ethereum and these tokens, and the stablecoins as well. But then the DeFi protocols started introducing their own tokens. And so layer after layer after layer, you create this sort of like pyramid of wealth, which is extremely self-referential. Each layer of wealth generates the layer of wealth on top of it. And when you look at something, now partly this is true, but partly it's also false. Partly it's an illusion, right? Because when you look at the market cap of a token, right? There's a billion tokens out there. Each one is supposedly worth $1, and so you've created $1 billion of wealth. But we all know that there's not really $1 billion of wealth there. If you tried to sell $1 million of those tokens, you'd crash the price. And so long as people aren't selling, it looks like there's vastly more wealth than actually exists. So Solana has to go through this process as well. Avalanche has to go through this process as well of creating this illusion of wealth. But the illusion of wealth has narrative power, and with Rootstock, none of this has happened. And so the primary pool of wealth is Bitcoin, and unless we go through this process of sort of creating like illusionary ICOs, you don't get to see the sort of spectacular growth that you see on other places. So there is a sort of like a dilemma between sustainable growth and spectacular growth. And in the bull markets of the world, the spectacular growth obviously gets much more attention. Then there's also the technical side. On the technical side, Rootstock is a Bitcoin sidechain. What does that mean? It means that Rootstock is merge mined with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin proof of work is what secures Rootstock. So it kind of piggybacks off of Bitcoin security. And Bitcoin is the native asset. But to move that native asset, right? So if you think about Ethereum, Ethereum started out with all of the Ethereum that existed in the world on Ethereum. Solana starts out with all of the SOL that exists in the world on Solana. With Rootstock, people have to make a conscious decision that they're going to peg. In other words, they're going to lock up their Bitcoin on the Bitcoin main chain and start using it on the Rootstock sidechain. And that introduces more frictions and more risk. Because anytime you're layering another layer, and that could be through a side chain. It could be through a roll-up. It doesn't matter how you're doing it. Anytime you're going through like a bridge, for example, from Ethereum to BSC or to Polygon, you're introducing a new thing which has its own risks, and so you're layering risk. You're giving up some degree of reliability. And so the Bitcoin sidechain will never be as secure as the Bitcoin main chain. And it's also going to have, certainly in the early days, more friction in being able to use it, right? So it doesn't work out of the box with all of the same wallets. It takes some time to peg your Bitcoin. And so these are things that the sovereign community is working very, very hard to reduce those frictions. But those are things that will always exist to one degree or another. And so the Bitcoin sidechain, you can't think of it as Bitcoin main chain. You have to recognize that there's some additional level, maybe very small, of risk and friction that is always going to be involved.
Understood. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so so how much friction are we talking about? And I think this is one of the topics that I've been finding most interesting recently, like looking at the space. So one of the things like I try to do when I look at anything is project what's going to happen in the future, a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. One of the and then try and think, all right, so like where is the fundamental value also? Like where's the reliable value? So I think the next big stage for crypto is going to be much more complicated. Every single stage that we go through is more complicated than the last. There's just many more things happening. But one really interesting thing that I think about is like games, because games are like purpose built for a blockchain environment, right? So if you think about like ETH Online, people spend 10 years playing that game. They build up their own like empires
Warships and all kinds of stuff, right?
Exactly. They create so much value, but that value
It's
can't
stuck.
become, yeah, it's stuck. It can't be their day job. They can't live off it. They can't, have that as part of their retirement plan. And the reason is because ETH Online is a bit like the Soviet Union, right? It's completely state-owned. It's completely controlled by the company that makes ETH Online. You can't move funds in or out of it. It's basically a Soviet dictatorship. And Soviet dictatorships have shit economies. But now we're starting to see things like Axie Infinity, where and people and loot, right? And all of these examples of people starting to create digitally native game designs and systems that have property rights attached to them because they are occurring in a blockchain space. All right.
That is one of the coolest things I've seen starting to develop with the profile picture NFTs, where you can have this this NFT and it's neat, it looks cool, etc. But then there are all kinds of different developers out there are building different games and applications where you can take this profile picture and play in this game and then also play in that game over there and still also have it, and it's yours. It's absolutely yours.
Exactly. And you can move it into a contract and you can borrow against it. And the cash you can spend potentially in a store and you can have it in a wallet. This is a huge change, right? So like we've gone through three big shifts in economy, right? We started out with an agricultural economy, then we moved to a industrial economy. Now we're in the service economy. Everyone is basically in some kind of services, right? So almost all people are either an accountant or a lawyer or working in finance or doing middle management or working as a hairdresser. Like, people joke that the West doesn't build anything anymore. We just like go around taking turns being each other's servants. I think the next phase of that is this digitally native economy where the activity is in social media and in these game worlds and in things that we haven't even imagined yet, which are going to be sort of in between or outgrowths of those things. And now that there's property rights to support that, there's going to be this massive opportunity for people to actually do that, live wherever they want, be freer than they've ever been able to be before, but actually maintain real value. And so you look at that and you say, wow, like, okay, that's huge for Solana, or that's huge for Ethereum. And I question that. And the reason I question that is because when people are going to be logging onto these platforms in a mature state, right? And the mature state isn't that far away from us. It's 2-3 years down the road. They are not going to do what we're doing. We go and we set up a wallet and we set up an RPC and we know which chain we're pointing at, and we, as a result, we go and we get the token that is associated with that chain, and we hold some SOL, or we hold some, AVA or whatever, right? These people, right, the vast majority of people, they're never going to know anything about that. They're going to know as much about that as people who use email know about SMTP protocol, right? So you'll have 1 billion people walking around with wallets that will have all of these different assets that will be connected to different systems. And the people who are working, and they'll be able to spend this money in the real world as well. But they won't have the faintest clue what chain they're using. The only thing they will know is how much money are they spending on a transaction. And they're going to want to spend as little as possible. So people will be using Ethereum or Solana or a sidechain or a whatever. They're not going to want to hold that token. They're not even going to know what the native token of that thing is. And then what you get is a race to the bottom. Everyone, and we're already seeing this with like Solana and with like roll-ups on Ethereum, everyone is trying to reduce transaction fees basically as close to zero as they possibly can. But let's say they manage, right? And they will. Then where's the value, right? Because you're only going to need to use this token when you're paying the fees, and you'll be able to abstract this away entirely. Your wallet will do this for you, right? So you'll have your Axie Infinity coin or your Sword of Destruction or your virtual reality avatar, whatever it is, and you want to do something with it. The system will take the local currency of whatever system that you're using and will convert just enough to pay the transaction fees, which will be close to zero. So basically convert almost nothing. And in a world like that, these utility coins, right? Because that's basically what they are, right? Ethereum is the mother of all utility coins. It's a big question to me how they maintain value at all. It's a race to the bottom. But what you do need is you need a global settlement layer for this entire thing, so that all of these things can talk together. And I think there's really only one candidate of something which isn't a utility coin and is really only designed to be sort of a digital money that exists out there, and I think that's Bitcoin.
I like it. I see I see what you're saying across all points. I I'm not gonna sit here and argue super strong for Ethereum or Solana, but I can see um, through narrative building, through scarcity, and through these different things, I can see long-term value accruing to different protocols. I think that it is a lot more of a it's more of a question mark than Bitcoin. For me, Bitcoin is so certain, and that's why I store my wealth there because of the certainty. For Ethereum, for Solana, etc., I see a huge amount of potential, but there's also this degree of uncertainty where, like you said, Ethereum could be completely different in a year from now, and that could be amazing. It could be an incredible thing, but we simply don't know. And you have to be following along very closely with all of these things and the markets if you're not going to lose your shirt. Every day, the markets are so volatile. And yes, Bitcoin's volatile as well, for sure. But the volatility is only reduced over time, and certainly reduced versus a lot of these other coins.
Yeah, so I think that's true, and I think if you, to a great extent, the entire market moves with Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin sort of got this heartbeat of every 4 years up and down, but each time it ends up higher, and the entire market moves with it, and that I don't think is a coincidence. Um, I also agree with you that there's never going to be zero value in these systems. This is a whole conversation in and of itself, but I think that there will be value that is retained by Solana and by Ethereum, in the same way that there's value in like an AWS, right? So you do need to be able to run on something. You do need to be able to pay some fees, but the the question I ask myself is like, do these things become like something where the utility is concentrated to the bottom, but it's never going to be zero? Or are they going to be able to capture a monetary premium, right? A monetary premium. In other words, like this additional value, like gold, for example, it has utility. You can use it in electronics, but its value is $10 trillion because 90% of that value is it's got this additional value of a reliable store of wealth.
Right.
And when you have like a million different wallets, because every single application is going to want to build out its own specific wallet to give the best perfect UI, in the same way that on your phone, every single application is sort of like its own wallet into that particular application's world, right? If there were currencies involved, then they would each be their own wallet. Then what people are going to look for is something that's going to be able to tie these things together, because all of these different apps are going to need to be able to interact with each other. And what they're going to be looking for is like the one most reliable store of value that they can use for settlement, for communication, basically. It's communicating value across the entire ecosystem. So the real question, I think the really exciting question, and I don't think we know the answer, but the really exciting question is Bitcoin going to bridge itself into that space, in which case I think it will dominate that space, or is it going to fail to bridge itself into that space, in which case we have a very much more complicated and messy future ahead of us.
Right.
And that's and so maybe, like, if I were to summarize, I think that's what I find the most exciting vision around Sovereign, because I think that there is a path for Bitcoin to be bridged into that, and I think that's what we're trying to do with Sovereign.
Yeah, I saw your comments the other day. I retweeted something I really liked, where I think you quoted Marty Bent, where he basically said, there's no competition to Bitcoin, which you alluded in many ways there isn't in some sectors, but at the same time, there is market share competition. People are deciding to put their money into Ethereum or Solana instead of Bitcoin to an extent, and you had talked about how Bitcoin hasn't fully won yet. Bitcoin is doing incredible, but there's all these different buckets where Bitcoin hasn't completed the journey.
Yeah, that's totally right. And I think it's basically, in a way, it's Bitcoin's game to fuck up. But the way it fucks that up is by, sometimes people call Bitcoin boomer tech. And I think that there's something clever about that. I think there's something true about that. And what I mean by that is, like, if the Bitcoin community as a whole sort of were to decide, we just want to be digital gold, then Bitcoin's going to end up as digital gold. It will be valuable because it will be a reliable store of value. But it won't be the settlement layer for the economy of the future. Thankfully, the entire Bitcoin community doing that is 100% not happening. And we know that because you can look at projects like Stacks. You can look at projects like the Lightning Network. You can look at projects like Rootstock, and you can look at projects like Sovereign. You don't need everyone to build out the tools that allow Bitcoin to bridge itself into the smart contract world. You just need one of these projects to succeed for that to happen, sort of like for everyone.
That's fair.
So I think that's, and you know, it's like when I look at the future going forward, I really do see two paths where it's in one path one of these projects succeeds, or maybe more than one of these projects succeeds, and the other path, you know, 50 years from now, my grandkids make fun of me and they're like, granddad, he's got all of this Bitcoin. You know, and he's buried it in the yard.
Well, what do you think? What do you think are the main, I guess, angles to try and shift the direction? At least, so I see, I see a multi-chain world, but I see Bitcoin taking on its own space in the smart contract and settlement layer space because of this reliability, because there's always going to be a degree of we'll say boomer, boomer vibes, people that want this slow, safe, reliable kind of tech, and investment to act as their settlement layer. I don't know. Sorry, I don't know where I was going with that thought. I lost my sentence. Um,
No. I think, if I understand correctly, maybe what you were asking is, all right, cool. So we've like spoken about the future and its different paths, but like, how would we get there, right?
yes, sure.
How do we build this bridge where Bitcoin starts providing all of these tools? So the one metaphor that I think about is, besides the boomer tech metaphor, is the metaphor of China. So China is this ancient civilization, basically invented everything, invented science, invented gunpowder, invented the compass, invented everything, right? Bigger population, let's call that more users. Bigger economy, let's call that more liquidity. And then something got fucked up. What got fucked up is that China became toxic. It became Chinese toxic maximalism. And the Chinese weren't allowed to trade with anyone, and they weren't allowed to think about any other civilization as having any value. And then 50 years later, the British sailed their battleships up to Beijing and took over Hong Kong, and it was super embarrassing. All right. I think we're in like that kind of moment where Ethereum is sailing its battleships up and down the Yangtze and is declaring itself ultrasound money, and this sort of empire that has the biggest user base, the biggest liquidity, and invented everything, is very embarrassed. So, what's the first step that China took to change the game, and do so extremely rapidly? The first thing it did is it said, all right, fuck that shit. What we're going to do, we're not going to pretend we're so super special and unique snowflakes anymore. We're going to just copy. We're going to copy until we've brought this bigger user base and this bigger pool of liquidity to the frontier, back to the level of everyone else. And it's going to be super easy because copying is always much, much easier than inventing. And then once we've reached that frontier, then we're going to take the lead again. All right. And so I think China's going to fail to take the lead because China hasn't really fully learned the lesson. It's a closed system. It's a dictatorship. It's going to struggle to take the next step. But it's amazing how rapidly they managed to reach parity with the rest of the world and become the world's second biggest and fastest growing economy. Now, Bitcoin, right? So with Sovereign's an extension of the Bitcoin protocol. It brings these tools of DeFi, NFTs, EVM compatibility, MetaMask, everything that we know from the rest of this ecosystem to Bitcoin. And the first thing we're focused on is just catch up. So Sovereign has built out what might be the most fully realized DeFi operating system anywhere right now. It's got Bitcoin-backed stablecoins, so it's got like the MakerDAO. It's got lending, so it's got like the Aave. It's got AMM swaps, so it's got like the Uniswap of Bitcoin. And it's got NFTs. It's going to have an NFT market is being built. It's got futures market being built. It's basically just doing catch up right now, and will probably continue to just do catch up for maybe another year or two. At that point, it will be at parity, but it will be at parity in a world where countries start adopting Bitcoin. It will be at parity in a world where the institutions start adopting Bitcoin. It will be at parity when the ETF comes out. And it will be at parity when this stuff starts going mainstream. And at that point, I think what it starts doing is it starts attracting the frontier, and and has the opportunity to again become the project, and and what I mean is Bitcoin become the project which is at the forefront of this innovation, because it's completely caught up. It's got the advantage of having the biggest user base, biggest liquidity, and most reliable sorry, most reliable system. And so yeah, I would say like where Sovereign is right now is kind of like 1983 China. Our job is catching up, and we're doing it very, very rapidly. So we've built out all of the tooling. Now we're working to start increasing the number of users, the TVL, the experience, the onboarding. And already there's a bunch of teams that are working on Sovereign that are looking to introduce things like mortgages, pensions, and connections to settlements between games that basically don't exist anywhere else.
That's cool. That's really cool. That's awesome. Yeah, no, I mean, I see the path, and I don't know, since you first introduced Sovereign to me, I immediately saw the value in being able to build out a full DeFi ecosystem on Bitcoin, simply because of the base level of reliability and knowing that Bitcoin is never going to change. To be able to do everything that we're currently able to do on Ethereum, etc., but to be able to do that with Bitcoin as the base currency, it's maybe not appealing to every single person. It's extremely appealing to me and many other people. And as you said, as countries around the world begin to adopt Bitcoin, begin to hold Bitcoin, and it becomes a legal currency, etc., I think that yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. With once we're at parity, then Bitcoin can take on so much more, because it's so much, in my opinion, it's so much easier to adopt Bitcoin from a Bitcoin isn't anyone's team. Bitcoin isn't the decentralization and the immaculate conception make it such an easy choice for a governing body to be able to say, yes, that's going to be what we decide to hold some wealth in. I feel like outside of Bitcoin in the the competing smart contract space, um, if I was a government leader, I would have to think extremely carefully about picking one of these to champion as our as a treasury asset. I would have to think so carefully. But with Bitcoin, it's a lot easier. I'm not saying it's easy for a government to go ahead and say, yes, we want to hold Bitcoin, but it's remarkably easier than any other cryptocurrency.
Right. And one of the interesting things is, right, Bitcoin has one thing that already scales perfectly, and that's the way in which provides you sovereignty. So um, we all know how Bitcoin makes us sovereign as individuals, but that sovereignty scales all the way up through Tesla's treasury to Fidelity, and then all the way up to countries now. And even countries, which are supposedly the only truly sovereign entities in the world, right? That's what a sovereign means. It means to be a country, aren't today truly sovereign, because they exist in a dollar denominated world
I was about
where
to
the
say that,
dollar,
yeah.
yeah, where the US control can sanction anyone, where the basically any every country accepts the financial rules that the US sets out, right? So, I mean, we've seen how Switzerland had to give up on numbered bank accounts. We've seen how Russia had to accept US sanctions. We've seen how the Cayman Islands, like everyone basically has to walk to the US's drumbeat. And the thing that they care about is the petrodollar. They care about the financial system. They care about SWIFT. They care about KYC. They care about being able to monitor every single person's financial transaction everywhere in the world. So no country besides the US right now, and maybe to some degree China, has true sovereignty. And countries that want to achieve sovereignty are going to be discovering, and that's why people are going to be watching El Salvador so closely, that Bitcoin actually provides countries, not just individuals, but countries with renewed sovereignty. Scalable sovereignty is an amazing thing. So one of the things that Sovereign has been doing is there's a team in El Salvador of El Salvadorians who have sort of joined the Sovereign project. There's work being done on being able to provide lending for Bitcoin, provide Bitcoin-backed stablecoins, because they have this really weird economy now, right? It's dollars, which are not controlled by El Salvador, and there's Bitcoin, which is highly volatile. And Bitcoin-backed stablecoins solve this problem because they create a form of dollar that isn't reliant on the Fed, and they eliminate the volatility problem that is inherent to Bitcoin, the raw asset. And so there's work being done now in introducing that through Sovereign into El Salvador. And so,
That's incredible.
Sovereign, yeah. So, I mean, there's really, really exciting things that are happening in the world, and people are going to be watching this. And I don't think El Salvador is the last country to do this. I think it's just the first.
From what I'm hearing in different channels, and this could just be rumors, who knows, that there are other countries that are essentially just waiting to make sure that it doesn't blow up in El Salvador and they're going to try and pull the trigger. I've heard that from a
I
few people that,
yeah,
yeah,
there's definitely other jurisdictions. Like I've had the privilege of having the opportunity to speak to some of them. There are other
that's
jurisdictions.
exciting.
They're waiting in the wings. They're waiting to see, does the IMF crush it? Does the World Bank crush it?
Right.
Are there going to be US sanctions? Does the population start rioting? Does it become a huge clusterfuck? And so I'm hoping it doesn't become a huge clusterfuck. And I
Fingers
think
crossed.
we can all help, in whatever way we can, like either by building or by heading down there as tourists and supporting the local economy, or buying Bitcoin today, buying $30 worth of Bitcoin today. Like, there's a million ways that we can help as individuals as well to make sure that this doesn't become a clusterfuck, because this could potentially be like the future that we want. And so I think, it's like we are now living in the sci-fi future that we've, like, the world felt like it was being reduced to just dumb apps that are coming out, and that was all that tech was giving us. And that's because there was no property rights associated with the internet, right? This huge revolution was basically a tech revolution with the legal economic sophistication of like 300 BC. But now we've added that, and so the way we can change the world fundamentally has really, really changed. And I think the future is going to be wild. And from the perspective of Sovereign, the project, it's one of several efforts. I don't know if Sovereign is going to be the single project to introduce this new way of thinking about Bitcoin. Maybe one of several, maybe something else. But I think right now Sovereign sort of is leading the pack in terms of adoption and growth, and that's crazy because it hasn't even been listed on a centralized exchange or anything. And those things seem to be coming. So like a number of exchanges have reached out to us and are looking to list it. Wallets are looking to integrate. Like, there's something brewing, which I think is very, very exciting, interesting, and sort of currently below the radar of most people.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Well, for now anyway. Yeah, I mean, I think without some of those, what do you call them? Uh, I can't think of the word, but events where, it draws more, um, more pool attention events, I guess I should say. Those are all going to continue to bring on more interested users and hopefully builders as well.
Yeah. Do you want maybe we open this up to some of the people
Yeah,
who have been listening patiently and they can ask questions?
that would be cool. I don't know how to do it, but I'm going to try and figure it out. Are you thinking is there like
I
a
think they
text thing on Spaces or?
think they just press the little mic button in the bottom left, and I think then we should see a request from them, and then you can maybe add them. I'm about
So
as you know, you and I. Turns out, Cryptodog, you and I we're boomers. I don't know how to
first
use
time Spacers. Okay, well, I see we've got three requests, but they've been requested for a while, so I don't know if they meant to ask questions or not. Um, I'm gonna let one of them through and see what happens. Oh, we've got another request. This guy's got himself an El Salvador and a volcano, so we know he's into Bitcoin. Let's
Hello,
see.
can you guys hear me?
Yes, we
Yeah, we
can.
can.
Hey,
Hello.
beautiful guys. I love the conversation and very philosophical at times. Just have a quick question in terms of China. I know you mentioned that China maybe won't, I'm not Chinese myself, but they won't keep up with the rest of the world. But I find that China has the most mining of Bitcoin and the most owned Bitcoin, probably demographically speaking. So, how do you respond to that?
Crypto, you're living in Hong Kong. You want to take that?
I'm not sure that that's entirely accurate. I think that American institutions own more Bitcoin than China does. Um, I don't know that from my experience in China, it's yes, there is a Bitcoin community, but it's not quite as robust as in the West. A big thing in that is because a lot of Chinese haven't had the opportunity to invest in something long term. They didn't have an SPX, they didn't have a stock market that they could just go into. What they thought of investing long term, it's all about houses and property. And so yes, there is some degree of growing Bitcoin long-term investors. But for the most of it, a lot of people in crypto in China have been playing more like it's like more like money games and kind of gambling. I don't mean to characterize an entire group of people, but from the general gist is that China and the Chinese community has been a lot less um, long-term thinking when it comes to Bitcoin and less of holders. There's much less of a hold mentality, and I think maybe that's changed now. But if you remember, during the whole rise from like 10K to 40K, the Chinese were shorting the whole way up.
Thanks for that
Yeah.
answer.
I just add to that briefly. I think China reached the frontier or got very very close. But the problem is that when you're at the frontier, the only way you get past that frontier and start taking the lead is through innovation. And innovation is extremely scary to a dictatorship, right? Because innovation means change. So what have they been doing? I think they've been cannibalizing their future right now. They've kicked out all the Bitcoin miners. They've crashed their stock market by going after their tech companies. They went after Alibaba. They went after the entire tech education. They've introduced a law that means that people can only play games for 3 hours a week. They're basically they got to the precipice of being able to take that next leap into the future because they brought themselves up to the level of everyone else. Then they looked at what it meant and they got scared and they're actually backtracking now. So I think China is going to continue to be very powerful for the next few years, but I think on a fundamental basis, it's currently cannibalizing its future.
That's an interesting take. I'm not sure what the future is going to look like. I'm watching and waiting, and I hear what you're saying about all these, recent changes. She's calling for a cultural rejuvenation, I believe is what he called it. Um, I'm not sure. I'm not well studied enough on all these things to, I guess, give a proper take, but I'm watching and listening.
Just one more question. I just have one more, and thanks
Sure.
for that. But for most of us, people that own Bitcoin or own property on the internet, etc., we're scared of. governance and what laws will do, what will the World Bank do for crypto, in terms of how much control can they have? Because, obviously now El Salvador's made its currency, but in terms of, yeah, that's my always, I've been in crypto for 4 years, and my always scariest thought was, will the government, force us to, I don't know, ban crypto totally, or can they actually ban hard software? Is it or smart contracts for that reason?
So
So go ahead.
yeah,
Sorry.
no, go ahead, Cryptodog.
I was going to say, I think they can. I think people are always going to find a way. People in China, they are very familiar with VPNs. So I think that with the internet, people are always going to find a way to access decentralized applications.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that one of the things that it's so cool that we've created this new economy, like digital economy, with its own set of rules that can govern itself, right? You can have property rights that don't require a government to enforce them, is that they're borderless. Like, let's say, you're living in the Philippines and you're making money off Axie Infinity, and the government of the Philippines decides to ban cryptocurrencies. Well, good luck, right? These people's livelihoods aren't in the Philippines. These people's livelihoods are in the ether. They're in the digital space.
Sorry
And
to
so,
interrupt, but that means that countries that do ban cryptocurrency or smart contracts or hard software risk lacking innovation and moving forward with the other countries.
yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. And I think that's what makes the risk of bans so much lower, um, because prohibition doesn't work for drugs, and it's definitely not going to work for something which people want even more, which is their livelihood and their ability to plug into a global economy.
Thank you. Those are some really great questions. I added a fellow named Three with some glowing eyes and a generic profile. Hey, buddy.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for this amazing talk, Yago. I'm really amazed about what's going to happen with DeFi on Bitcoin. I was just wondering about the design of Sovereign, this kind of cartoony way of designing the interface. What kind of ideas went into that? Because, I mean, I'm a bit hesitant about it. I find it, doesn't it put off people like professional people a bit?
Yeah, it certainly does. But that's because Sovereign isn't designed for professional people. Sorry, Sovereign, the protocol, is not designed for professional people or
Hmm.
regular people or anyone. It's designed to be used by everyone in the same way that Bitcoin is. And so, if you think about the way Bitcoin started, like, there was no one was going to, no institutions were going to get into it. It was fucking magical internet money, and there was like this stupid
Yeah.
gif of a wizard, right? Um, the front end that you're referring to, which is the sovereign.app front end, which is the one most people use, is just one of several front ends that are plugging into the Sovereign protocol. It's
Okay.
one of the big contributions I did early on was helping to sort of set up the first version of that, and a lot of people have been working on it. It's open source, and anyone can run their own front end. Now, other people are starting to run different types of front ends, and there'll probably be like a Sovereign Pro interface, and there'll probably be like wallets that you don't even know you're using Sovereign, and there'll be game applications where Sovereign's running in the background and you don't know it. The front end that you see is, all of the blame goes to me. Or not all of the blame, but most of the blame goes to me. And I did it because that's an aesthetic that I like. And for me, what it symbolizes is that Sovereign is giving Bitcoin superpowers, that we are Bitcoin mutants. We're not Bitcoin maxis, right? We're Bitcoin mutants in that we want Bitcoin to evolve. We want it to just like Rug be able to absorb the superpowers of every other thing that it sees around it, to make Bitcoin stronger. and also because I think, when you're starting a revolution, which is what I hope we're participating in, you want it to be fun.
Beautiful. Can you talk about these other interfaces that you said, like we're talking about, like what the addresses are? Or...
Yeah, so there's another protocol that recently launched on Sovereign. It's called Babelfish, so you can go check it out at babelfish.money. And it's like this risk-protected aggregated stablecoin system. There's Sovereign.tech, which is like someone had built out a new Explorer. So you can also go check out the RSK Explorer, but there's a one called Sovereign.tech, so SOVRYN.tech. And there's a few others. So like there's a project that are currently working on building the ability for people to take out zero interest loans on their Bitcoin, and they call their project Zero, and they're working on their own interface. So what we're trying to do with Sovereign.app is aggregate all of these things like in one view, and that's like a lot of work, and it's hard, and we're never going to be perfect at it, but different sub protocols are creating their own front ends, and then a number of wallets are starting to integrate it. So if like the first example of this is Defiant Wallet, which allows you to sort of trade on Sovereign without needing to go to any app at all. And recently Paul from Edge sort of gave a talk where he said that they were looking to do something similar, and there's some others who I can't speak about because they haven't spoken about it themselves yet, but like bigger players who are looking to do similar things. So I think you should, like, these protocols, the front end is just a gateway to them. What I think maybe behind what you're saying is, like, can I trust this? And I would say to you, don't trust, verify. But the way the Bitcoin community, the Bitcoin dev community works is, part of the Sovereign culture. And so, everything is super tested. Every single pull request is audited by multiple parties. There's one of the biggest bug bounties out there for $1 million, which has never been claimed, but is like sometimes we boost it to just try and get someone to claim it. There's a really, really significant emphasis on building really secure code, because we're trying to build something for generations. We're not trying to build something for this particular bull run.
Thanks for the explanations. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and let on Emmanuel, who's also got a volcano and some eyes. I like it. Hello, Emmanuel. He might not be active.
Hey, no, I'm here. Hello,
Awesome.
Hello, Cryptodog. Thanks for hosting. Yago, I've been listening to your talks. You're doing great, and with Sovereign, so it's really looking like a promising project. My question is in regards to
Thanks for hosting, by the way, the Cryptodog.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So my question is in regards to the thinking behind Bitcoin being digital property and digital gold. See, I see that there's two sides of Bitcoin maximalism. There's the complete Bitcoin only type of people, and everything else is a scam. I see that as complete maximalism, and I think they're actually just blind. And then there's...
Just while we wait, what's your favorite DeFi coin, the Cryptodog?
Oh, he's on. He's Emmanuel's talking right now.
Oh, he's talking.
Yeah. Yeah. So back to what I was saying. I say that there's two sides of being maximalisms. There's the complete maximalism as the ones who think there's Bitcoin only and everything else is a scam. And then there's, I think, the people who are partially partially in that realm where they think Bitcoin's digital gold and digital property, but there's also Ethereum and all these other cryptos that can exist, but they don't want to innovate. They just think of Bitcoin as digital only and digital property. So um, my question is in regards to that sort of thinking where people think, if they're going to build DeFi on top of Bitcoin or NFTs on top of Bitcoin, that it actually opens the door for Bitcoin becoming a competitor, a technology competitor to your other cryptos like Ethereum. So yeah, how do you see that? Because yeah, like is it going to open the door to becoming a technology competitor at that point?
So thank you very much. I think that maximalism makes Bitcoin dumber uh, because it refuses to look at other things and see the value in them. And there's a lot of value in them. Zero knowledge proofs is something which emerged to a great extent because of work that was done and funded by the Ethereum community. It's a huge leap forward from the perspective of cryptography. And so we should always be searching for smart ideas everywhere. So that's one reason that I think it makes Bitcoin dumber. The other reason I think it makes Bitcoin dumber is because I think it's complacent. It's like, okay, we don't need to do anything. We've already won. That's not an attitude which maintains adversarial thinking, which is at the base of Bitcoin culture. It's not an attitude that most of the people I know who have been in Bitcoin for a long time have. It's really an attitude of people who have come in, listened to a few pro Bitcoin podcasts, and now they think that and they're parroting stuff that they've heard. Now, in a way, that's good because at least it will allow them to make the one good decision that you need to make in our generation, which is to buy and hold Bitcoin. But it does blind them to a lot of things going on. So that's why I don't call myself a Bitcoin maximalist. I call myself I reject maximalism. I see myself as a Bitcoin mutant. I see Bitcoin main chain as being this thing that never needs to change. And then on top of that, we build layers that can do everything. And so when I heard about Sovereign, it didn't take very long for me to basically go full-time Sovereign, and I've been contributing to it in every way I can since, because I think that's what Sovereign is doing, and I think it represents a renaissance in how we think about Bitcoin.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks for that, Yago. So, do you see that the shift changing where these maximalists actually start accepting, you know, uh, uh, like DeFi being built on Bitcoin, the way Sovereign is?
100%. I mean, first of all, in private conversations with hardcore Bitcoin maxis, they're telling me that they like what Sovereign is doing. They're starting to become more interested. I don't know if you recently saw the stuff that Dan Held has put out, and so there's been more and more of that kind of thing. And so I think it is shifting. I think especially the people who sort of were in Bitcoin, say pre-2014, remember the excitement, the innovation, and want to get back there. People like Eric Voorhees. But it's even bigger than that. I mean, Jack Dorsey is getting in on the game, right? Square is getting in on the game, and they're working to build out tools for Bitcoin DeFi. And if you looked at their tweets, they were talking about building on rootstock, and partially, or I think to a great extent, that's just because of what Sovereign has built. So, yeah, I think it's definitely changing. These things don't change overnight; they change over the course of months and years. And we're very early in that phase, but I think the conversation around Bitcoin is going to be totally different a year from now.
Perfect. Thanks, Yago.
I'm gonna go ahead and bring on, let's see, how about Luke? Hey Luke, how's it going? Okay, maybe I bring someone else on. I'll give Luke 10 seconds.
Luke, you're on mute.
Okie dokie, Luke. Well, if you hop on soon, no worries. Just I guess you'll come on next. I'm gonna bring on Abe with a smiley face. I love that. Hey Abe, how's it going?
Hey
Oh,
guys,
we
my
got Luke.
computer working?
Oh no, Abe, we're gonna hear from Luke first. I'm sorry. Your mic is on now, Luke.
Yeah, hey guys, loving the chat. I am just probably quickly. I had a couple of points. I think I'm a maximalist myself, and I'm often referred to as a bit of a toxic maximalist. But I think like I have no problem with everything being built on Bitcoin. I think the reason why I'm a maximalist is I just think there's no use case to all of these other chains because, like Yago was saying earlier, it's a race to the bottom in efficiency and fees. So I think once all of these smart contract platforms like Solana, Algorand, Ethereum, Binance Chain, as it's a race to the bottom with fees, like Yago was saying, what monetary value does that token hold for the platform? So that was just the topic on maximalism. I haven't heard many Bitcoin maximalists say that they just want Bitcoin to remain digital gold and no innovation to occur on the side chains like RSK or layer twos and threes like Liquid and Lightning. I haven't heard one maximalist frame himself with that kind of view. I just thought that was interesting.
I feel like a lot of maximalists have just kind of given up. They've just said, "Oh, well, we can't have that. Well, I'm not gonna like it then."
Yeah, I've definitely like every now and then you meet some really stubborn ones who are maximalists and haven't actually looked at why all of these other 10,000 coins aren't decentralized. I have come across some of those maximalists, but I think a lot of them do understand that everything's going to be built on top of the Bitcoin, on top of Bitcoin in the forms of layers and obviously side chains as well.
Right. So, Luke, the only thing I would say is that my problem with some of those people is that they think it happens by default. They think they don't need to compete in the market today. I'll give you an example, right? RGB and DLCs are very cool technology. Just like Lightning Network, it's cool technology, but they haven't seen the level of adoption that EVM compatible smart contracts have seen, right? So what Bitcoin should be doing is adopting EVM compatible smart contracts, right? Not doubling down on DLCs, which could take forever to actually be deployed and gain traction, because I don't think anything is guaranteed. The world is not guaranteed to choose the best path. It could choose VHS instead of Betamax, right? And so what we need to do as Bitcoiners and as a Bitcoin community and as a community of sovereigns, people who want to create a world where we're building on the most solid foundations for freedom into the future and for coming generations, is we need to take the fight to where it is, right? And a big part of that fight is smart contracts, DeFi, the ability to use Bitcoin without intermediaries or middlemen, the ability to do lending and borrowing, the ability to do scaling through zero-knowledge proofs. These are the things that Sovereign is focused on. And the thing that sometimes frustrates me is that there's this idea that Bitcoin has already won, and so we can take as much time as we want to push out the innovation that we want. So if you look at like Blockstream, right, they're a massively funded company, $3.6 billion. They push things out super, super slowly because they feel like they have all of the time in the world. They're not in the market competing. Competition is the best thing for driving things forward, and we need to address that competition directly.
No, I definitely agree. Competition's good, and it will drive innovation. I just wanted to say as well, I think these Twitter Spaces are great. I've been following the Cryptodog for goddamn years now, and it's interesting to put a voice to the profile picture. These Twitter Spaces are pretty great, and I'm sure a lot of people are learning a lot from them.
Hey, thanks for following. I really appreciate that.
I did want to weigh in as well. I like the earlier point that you were making, Yago, about China. I don't think they're as powerful as a lot of people give them credit for. I think if you look at their demographics, it's absolutely terrible. They've got some of the worst demographics in the world, and they've had that one-child policy law for a lot of time. And I think maybe the CCP realised that they've got terrible demographics and they need to change it. I think a couple of months ago, didn't they change their policy, allowing their citizens to have more kids by removing that one child policy law? That combined with their massive fuck up by kicking out the Bitcoin miners earlier this year, I think it's maybe two really big fundamental fuck ups that China's made. I just don't think they're as strong as a lot of people think they will be.
It's possible. I think they do have demographic challenges as well, but I think demographic challenges can be overcome. I'm more concerned for the fact that the Chinese people need to deal with the fact that they have this very insecure government, and insecure people behave aggressively, and so do insecure governments.
Okay, let's have Abe on. Thank you so much for waiting.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. I really like this space. I loved your perspective, Yago. I hadn't really thought of it that way. I think that's really cool. Kind of makes sense. Udiverse always, saying it's digital real estate. But I wanted to come on and just say, so there's all this uncertainty about U.S. regulations and Bitcoin, and I really think that it's in the U.S.'s best interest to for Bitcoin to do well. And my reasoning is the billions, possibly even trillions worth of Bitcoin that they've confiscated through their law enforcement endeavors. A lot of that they probably have the wallets, but not the keys. And it's going to take time to crack into those. Sorry. So I wonder, how much. I mean, they're never going to come out and admit that, obviously, but I just wonder what your guys' opinion is on how their store of Bitcoin that they've confiscated how you think that would affect decisions that they come out with regulatory.
Honestly, I don't think it's going to have much of an impact in sort of the near term. The main reason is that all regulators and the U.S. regulators are dealing with a world which is spinning quite quickly out of control in many, many ways. The amount of dollars that they need to print to keep the economy where it is just a symptom, but a very, very worrying symptom of the fact that our economy is not currently structured well. Our economy is not structured well in a lot of ways, but to a great extent it's because it's become over-financialized, over-dependent on fiat printing, and disconnected from the primary driver of economic growth right now, which is technology and digital technology. And no country is well positioned to manage digital technology and the coming future of an economy primarily based in a borderless world because of their reliance on borders. So I think what we need to be thinking about as individuals is, what does the world look like when countries as a concept have substantially less value that they can provide us as citizens and substantially less power to influence the future. Countries are the state, and the countries that we know them are a very recent invention. They've been around for about 150 years, and they are a product of the industrial age, where there was a very clear logic to having clear borders around taxation, where there was a lot of centralized infrastructure like rail, and then afterwards roads that needed to be built, where there was a sudden shift to massive armies instead of small armies of professionals. And then to support the armies and to have the ability to control large enough populations to have these armies, you needed everyone speaking the same language. So you created nationalized education. You needed to be able to promise them that you would be taking care of them. So you created national healthcare systems. This whole infrastructure is based on an industrial mindset. The industrial age is over. And the structures that came into being with the industrial age are not going to survive into this shift beyond the industrial age. Now, this is not something that's going to happen next year, but the reason at base that we're experiencing so much disruption, that Australia has turned itself back into a penal colony, that the United States is printing dollars like mad, that the EU is introducing absurd regulations around privacy that don't work, is because the basic structures, right, of these territorial monopolies do not map well to our world and cannot deal with the problems that we have. They can't deal with COVID. They can't deal with digital commerce or privacy. They can't deal with global warming. And our generation is going to completely restructure society because we have no choice. And the way we're going to do that, I think, is through the tools that we're developing now in these little incubators, which are just basically test nets. Things like DAOs, things like NFTs, things like digital crypto gaming. These are all like tiny little experiments that just give you a hint of what the future is going to look like. So just to summarize, I think regulation is going to happen. I think it's going to get worse, and I don't think it's going to matter. It's going to be obsolete governments trying to maintain control as that control rapidly slips from their fingers.
And the faster the control slips from their fingers, the faster that they freak out and try to grab onto the control. I think The Sovereign Individual is a pretty good book written in the 1990s, pretty much talking about everything you just spoke to, Yago, how nation states would react to a digital money as we transition into the digital age. And they actually predicted that the sovereign individual would be able to be a digital nomad. He'd be able to go to any country he wanted around the world. And obviously the nation states would freak out with that. And they could, I think in the book, they talked about all sorts of different scenarios that nation states might try to react and grab onto control and stop the digital nomad jumping from tax haven to tax haven. And in 1997, they actually predicted that governments might implement a global pandemic to lock down the borders and lock down their citizens and stop them from taking advantage of all the beautiful things that technology provides the individual in encryption, digital money, and wealth that can't be confiscated or taxed. So I think it's a really good book everybody should read, and you just reminded me of it when you were talking about the nation state and it losing control.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that book because it's a remarkable book. What's remarkable is it was written 25, 30 years ago. You read it, and it basically is a map of everything that has happened up until now and a map of what's going to happen. It's ridiculously predictive. It's ridiculously accurate. And the reason it's predictive, the reason it's accurate, is because they understood what was happening from first principles. If you understand what's happening from first principles, you can tell where things are going. So I definitely encourage everyone to read the book. I think it's a really great book. And I think the deeper lesson is, if you want to know where things are going, understand the basic principles of incentives that are driving everything. Cryptodog, maybe we'll take one last question.
What
Let's
was
do
that
it.
book? What was that book called?
The Sovereign Individual.
All right, thank you.
All right, here we go. We're going to add on crypto. Yes, crypto FER. Or should I go with Ramon? I can't tell. Maybe Ramon was first. I'm sorry. I'm going to add Ramon on. Hey, Ramon. How's it going?
If we want Bitcoin to be global, I think it needs to improve on the user experience. For example, I know a lot of people that they buy Bitcoin, they leave it on the exchanges because they are truly scared of making a transaction and commit a mistake, and they lose it all. And then also, I think, for example, running a node, if you want to run a node, is still fairly complicated for the average user to do so. So I don't think how you can see that evolve. So the user experience is much, much easier, and it can truly scale globally.
Cryptodog, you wanna address that?
I've got some thoughts on nodes. I think the space is changing so rapidly that maybe in another 12 months time, I think the ease of running a node will be very easy. I mean, if you look back only 12 to 18 months, I agree it was very difficult for the everyday person to run a node without being able to use like the command line. But I mean, if you look at what's occurred in the past 12 to 18 months just in the Bitcoin node space, anybody can download a node, and it's as easy as being able to flash an SD card, and nodes are pretty much fully packaged, ready to go in the form of MyNode, and now you've got Umbrel, and you've got all these different node packages making it really easy. So I just think in another 12 to 18 months, I don't think we can conceptualize how quickly technology is going to change and make things a lot easier.
I appreciate that input, Luke. I haven't been following as closely on in that part of the space myself, so thank you for that.
Yeah, I completely agree that user experience is the key to the mass adoption. And I think that's I think what ultimately happened is you hit mass adoption when people don't even know that they're using technology. We are so early in this space that even though we think like we're coming in late, the fact that you know what technology you're using is an indicator that we are super early. Like, nobody gets into a car and knows how the carburetor works. Most of them don't even know what a carburetor is. Nobody picks up a phone and knows how it works. There's this great joke of President Eisenhower and his wife went to visit a military base, and President Eisenhower's wife was given a demonstration of a wireless radio, like the soldiers, those big radios that people would hold on their backs, and they had like a big phone, and you could call back to HQ. And she said to President Eisenhower, "Isn't that amazing? It's a telephone that works without any wires. How do they do that?" And Eisenhower looked at her and said, "And telephones that work with wires, you know how they work?" So yeah, it's when
funny.
you don't even know. It's when you don't even know what technology you're using. That's when you've reached mass adoption worthy technology. And so that's why I say it's like, if what you think is that people are going to focus on one particular chain, you're wrong. And that's true about the Bitcoin chain as well. People, the chains themselves don't have network effects. What has network effect is the properties of reliability and the assets themselves. And I think that's a good framework to which to think about these things. And I want to say, Cryptodog, thank you so much for hosting us. This is really, really great. I don't often get to have these kinds of conversations. It's great catching up with you. And thank you all for joining, listening, and asking such great questions. And most importantly, stay sovereign.
Hey, I had so much fun. Thank you, Yago, for coming on. This was, yeah, for everyone listening, this was super last minute. He was just like, we were talking about catching up, just him and I. He was like, hey, why don't we make it a Spaces? And I thought, sure, let's go. And this is a really awesome experience, and I appreciate everyone listening along.
Thanks for hosting, Dog.
Thanks, guys. Everyone have a great day out there.